the angel apostasy.
The hushed silence broke in a communal gasp as the boulder-sized head sloppily skid across the floor. Tattered fabric from an old stall came undone, and it cracked open like an over-ripened pumpkin. All of its tendrils had been clipped halfway and bound, attached to Perturabo's waist for later use. Damekos kept his composure. He leaned over, spoke quickly to an advisor, and a beat later stood with his arms held out. "Our hero returns triumphant." He clapped his hands twice. "Come one and all, and we shall feast to celebrate Perturabo's glory." With an air of jubilant mischief, he pointed at Perturabo and said, "I will brook no argument. You shall regale us with your tale over wine, hot food, and more wine." And so Perturabo did. He told them of the trek to the Hoplitian Pass and the tunnel system that lay within. They oohed at the fight to the great burrowed chamber, and awed at the depictions of the monsters, finally cheering at his dashing of the brood's eggs. When a young noble asked why he limited himself in his chosen tools of war, he looked off for a moment, summarizing a long chain of thoughts, and replied, "A weapon in many ways is like any other tool. They're used to help us build or destroy. The gun runs within an elite circle. Like the wheel, shovel, and hammer, it was a turning point for man. The gun and its consequences have been an utter boon for the human race. However, what it adds in its power, it removes in its direct connection to violence. Violence should never be thoughtless, but swift and with intent. There is a tool for every job, and its vocation is as an equalizer. Those base creatures did not warrant the honor of such a fine creation of man." Those last words left the rapt listeners fawning at his gallantry. This time he partook of the food and wine amongst people of the court, all the while studying interpersonal interactions. He noted things like the differences between aristocratic behavior and life at home. Finding the occasional cruel barb worked as well as a honeyed word to win some over. He observed varying shades of charisma and their interplay with one another. For once, a part of nature did not unravel at his slightest mental tug. The challenge excited him. He found that if he took people's past experiences and natural inclinations as properties determining their behavior, he could better calculate how they interacted with the world around them. This translation of the ephemeral into manageable data eased his mind with a sense of control. In some threads of his attention, he began to play a game. He would use the extreme amount of data he passively absorbed about a person and see how long it would take him to correlate the relevant details to explain their traits. He would challenge himself to see how little information he needed before he could create a personality profile and paint a picture of their life in his head. He would delight at the slight nuances which would invalidate his models of the human mind and require him to recompile it with new data. This growing framework of human experience allowed him a form of empathy, a connection to his mortal counterparts, which he was heretofore incapable of. As evening flowed into night, the aura of intimidation Perturabo exuded from his cavalier handling of the creatures remains dissipated somewhat. While most still kept their distance, bold women sat nearest. Bolder still dared a glancing touch. Between their sweet smells, warmth, and soft qualities, he could understand the entrancing effect they had on his brother. The next day came, and Perturabo appeared before Damekos. "What do you request of me now?" "Patience, patience," Damekos cooed. "I will have your next task in due time." Perturabo did not move. Damekos's placid smile followed suit. The moment stretched out. The observers dared not even breathe, lest the competing forces of will turn their direction. Perturabo spoke. "I have not come here to play at court like some retainer at your whim. Make no mistake, I have agreed to your terms and prolonged my search for Hector as penance for my actions towards your man, not for some deference to some imagined right you have over me. You have had plenty of time to consider your next request. State it now, or I shall deduct one from my debt and come back tomorrow for my next." Damekos's smile remained, but all the mirth left his eyes. He did not speak quickly, but did not dare to tarry too long and lose one of his golden opportunities. "I want you to join my army. Fight under my banner." "No." "No. Monsters do not cause you to falter, but the idea of simple men leaves you cowering. I cannot believe it. Surely you still seek my aid." No, slaying a beast's fine. Labor, work me, but I will not kill men in repentance for the killing of a man. Damikos' smile faded. Fine. I was unaware of your moral opposition. I am not without my God-given morality. Give me a day, and I will present you a replacement. Face unmoved, Perturabo gave the slightest nod and left. Good as his word, the next day came, and Perturabo was tasked with slaying the Kiris, large carnivorous birds who had been preying upon livestock at a concerning rate. Many men have tried to strike them down or burn the trees which held their nests, but it was said that their feathers were stronger than iron and could withstand the heat of the Olympian god of the forge himself. Perturabo left to prepare himself, but was stopped on the way to the forge by Caliphone. It is good to see you, Perturabo. You've performed a marvellous feat. She nodded in respect. So they say, but the nest was not much more than the other beasts that stalk the countryside. Maybe the way you trivialize the extraordinary is why you are here. I am only here for my brother. I thought I had made that plain. So you say, but how I hear it told, the way you regaled the halls with your deeds spoke more of passion than obligation. I merely wanted to provide the proper context. Speaking of obligation, it did not escape my notice that you were absent. She smiled. I'd be shocked if anything had, but they say you appeared to enjoy the company as well as the feast. As for my part, Father will rarely let a moment to celebrate pass, and as you say, I am usually obligated to attend most events, lest one of my brother's mistakes go uncorrected. Enjoy? Perturabo thought on it for a moment. No, truth be told, I found it quite exhausting, but it was educational. Her smile turned from pleasant to coy. Exhausted? I find that hard to believe, but educational? I suppose there is always more to learn. A piece of wisdom you'll find wanting during your stint at court. Perturabo returned a small smile at that. Although what you could learn from that company I couldn't say. Where are you off to now? To the forges, my room to prepare, and then to the Kiritian swamps. If you are still in the mood for an education, I'd suggest climbing the western mountain of the Hoplishan Pass. I've heard it looms over the swamps and provides an excellent vantage point of their nest amongst other things. Intrigued by her words, Perturabo decided to follow Caliphone's advice. He left before dawn, though there was an unusual amount of activity around the city. As his path broke from the main road, he noticed ranks of men marching in formation down the path he took not so long ago. The climb was easier than he thought. His armor, a second skin despite its increasing bulk, had only partially inhibited his movements. The sabatons needed to be slammed in the rock at an angle to create purchase, and it inspired an adaptive design which improved with every step. He had made good time, observing the birds' nests from noon until they roosted at dusk. He noted their size, flight patterns, and determined the composition of their wings. He pulled out a tendril tip of the gorgonite and ran his thumb over it. It would be enough. Perturabo waited until the birds left the next day before he got up to leave. As he gathered himself, his acute sense of hearing picked out noise through the whipping mountainous winds. The sounds, fresh to his conscious mind but well-trod ground in his genetic memory, it was the disciplined chaos of a war host's muster. Compelled, he climbed across to where he knew the small border town would be. He thought Damikos was just an especially entrepreneurial man, but nocturnal activity came into focus now. Standing atop the edge of the summit overlooking the town, he witnessed a near-constant convoy of carts and men still entering. He spent little time here, and soon moved across the rock face, following the trail leading opposite Lokos. He could see it all from this vantage point. He knew every moment in search of his brother mattered, but his ability to move through the sheer cliffs provided a unique opportunity to witness what was to come, and more importantly satisfy his craving urge. Something internally yearned to be a part of what was about to happen. Early dawn's twilight came, and the formations of men moved into Eurysthenia. His eyes darted all over, both his conscious and subconscious mind taking in every detail. Every weak point of Eurysthenia's walls screamed at him, as well as each bumbling mistake from Lokos soldiers. Despite the incompetence in the eyes of Perturabo, Lokos won the day. He soon left after witnessing the degradation and depravity that followed. He returned to Lokos with his sharp focus split. Instead of immediately departing for the Kiritian swamps, He spent 2 days in his room relieving himself, writing volumes containing notes about the taking of Eurysthenia, fundamental principles on siegecraft, and blueprints of improvements and new designs of Locos's weapons of war. Once satisfied, he needed to figure out how to handle the public act of deception he suffered. Was it an obvious lie to everyone else? Was there an ulterior motive or just a personal affront? He did not know whether to strangle or mock Damekos, and fluctuated between furious and contemplative. He settled his humours by performing some relatively simple work in the forges before he sallied out to make quick work of the Kyries. Perturabo came to the court immediately after his arrival. The smell of black smoke clung to his body. "The deed is done." He threw a small wet bag of Kyrie parts in front of him.